Tale 1: The Equipment Thief. Experienced backpacker Jake Rodriguez had planned the perfect solo trip 5 days in Montana's Glacier National Park, hiking the remote Highline Trail with minimal crowds and maximum solitude. He'd packed carefully: GPS device, satellite communicator, water purification tablets, and enough food for a week. The first 2 days were everything he'd hoped for: clear skies, stunning views, peaceful campsites beside pristine lakes. Jake felt completely at home in the wilderness, confident in his skills and equipment. On the third morning, he woke to find his backpack moved 3 feet from where he'd placed it the night before. Nothing seemed missing, but Jake knew he hadn't repositioned it. He'd been backpacking for 15 years and was meticulous about gear placement. That evening, at his next campsite, Jake noticed footprints around his tent, boot prints larger than his own, pressed deep into the soft earth. Someone had walked circles around his shelter while he slept. Jake checked his gear obsessively before bed, memorizing the exact position of every item. In the morning, his water purification system was gone. Just vanished, leaving no trace except those same large footprints leading away from his campsite into dense forest. Without purification tablets, Jake faced a serious problem. The nearest water source might contain giardia or other parasites. He could boil water, but his fuel supply was limited. On day 4, his GPS device disappeared, then his emergency satellite communicator. Each morning brought new theft, always while he slept, always leaving behind those haunting footprints that suggested someone was systematically stripping away his survival capabilities. Jake tried staying awake to catch the thief, but exhaustion eventually claimed him. He'd wake to find more equipment missing: his headlamp, his emergency whistle, his backup batteries. By day 5, Jake was effectively stranded. No navigation tools, no communication device, no water purification. Worse, he realized his stalker wasn't just stealing randomly. They were taking items in a specific order designed to trap him in the wilderness. Jake abandoned his planned route and hiked directly toward the nearest trailhead, using the sun for navigation. Behind him, he could hear branches breaking, footsteps maintaining distance but never getting closer or farther away. Someone was herding him, controlling his movement by stealing specific gear and forcing him toward a particular destination. Jake reached the parking area after 12 hours of desperate hiking. His car was there, but his stalker had left one final message: Jake's stolen equipment arranged in a perfect circle around his vehicle, as if displaying trophies from a successful hunt. Rangers found no trace of whoever had been following Jake, but they discovered other hikers had reported similar experiences: equipment systematically stolen, mysterious footprints. The feeling of being watched and herded through the wilderness like prey. Tale 2: The Mountain Shadow. Sarah Chen considered herself an experienced climber. The solo ascent of Mount Washington should have been routine, a challenging but familiar route she completed several times before. She packed for 3 days, planning to summit and return via the Tuckerman Ravine Trail. The weather was perfect when she started: clear skies and moderate temperatures. Sarah made good time on the first day, reaching her planned campsite ahead of schedule. She felt strong, confident, completely in her element. On the second morning, she noticed someone climbing below her, perhaps 200 yards back. Another solo climber, nothing unusual. The mountains attracted independent adventurers seeking solitude and challenge. But the climber maintained the exact same distance all day. When Sarah stopped for water, the figure stopped too. When she resumed climbing, it followed. When she checked her route with binoculars, the person was always there, matching her pace perfectly. By afternoon, Sarah felt uneasy. The climber's behavior seemed too calculated, too focused on her movements rather than the mountain itself. Sarah decided to test her suspicions. She took a detour off the main trail, hiking toward a small peak that would add several hours to her route. The other climber followed, maintaining that same precise distance. When Sarah stopped to make camp, she watched through binoculars as her stalkers set up their own camp in direct line of sight, close enough to monitor her activities but far enough to avoid direct confrontation. That night, Sarah barely slept. Every sound could be footsteps. Every shadow might conceal someone approaching her tent. She clutched her whistle and bear spray, but felt helpless in the vast darkness of the mountain. Morning brought a new horror. Sarah's food cache, carefully hung in a bear-proof bag, was gone, not torn down by animals, but neatly removed, leaving behind cut rope ends that indicated human interference. Without food, Sarah faced a serious dilemma. She could push for the summit and hope to complete her planned route quickly, or retreat immediately while she still had energy. She chose retreat, but her stalker adapted. As Sarah descended, the figure moved to higher ground, maintaining visual contact from above. Sarah felt like prey being tracked by a patient predator who had all the time in the world. Hours into her descent, Sarah realized the terrible truth. Her stalker wasn't following her route, they were cutting off her escape routes, forcing her toward specific trails that led deeper into the wilderness rather than back to safety. Sarah abandoned the established trails entirely, bushwhacking through dense forest toward where she hoped the parking area would be. Behind her, she could hear branches breaking, someone crashing through the underbrush in pursuit. She reached her car after 8 hours of panicked hiking, dehydrated and exhausted. Her stalker was nowhere to be seen, but Sarah found a note tucked under her windshield wiper. "Good hunt. See you next time." Police investigated but found no leads. The note contained no fingerprints, and security cameras at the trailhead showed only Sarah's vehicle. Her stalker had approached and departed without leaving any traceable evidence. Tale 3: The Kayak Pursuit. Marine biologist Dr. Amanda Foster planned a research trip to study orcapods in the remote waters off Alaska's Kenai Peninsula. Solo kayaking was her preferred method, quiet, maneuverable, minimal environmental impact. She'd done this dozens of times, camping on small islands and documenting whale behavior. The first 3 days were productive. Amanda recorded several pod interactions and gathered excellent acoustic data. Her waterproof equipment functioned perfectly, and the weather remained cooperative. On day 4, she noticed another kayaker in the distance. Not unusual, these waters attracted adventurous paddlers from around the world, but this kayaker seemed more interested in Amanda than in whale watching. Every time Amanda moved to a new observation point, the other kayak appeared within an hour, always maintaining the same distance, always positioned to keep her in sight. Amanda tried varying her routine, paddling to different islands, changing her schedule. The stalker adapted to every modification, demonstrating intimate knowledge of the area's currents and weather patterns. On day 6, Amanda's situation became desperate. She woke on a small island to find her kayak missing, not washed away by tides deliberately taken. Fresh scratches in the sand showed where someone had dragged it above the high tide line and carried it away. Amanda was stranded on a rocky island barely 2 acres in size, with no communication device and limited supplies. Her research radio had been in the kayak, along with most of her food and her emergency shelter. From her island, Amanda could see her stalker's kayak circling at a distance, too far to hail but close enough to monitor her situation. The message was clear. She was trapped, completely dependent on her captor's whims. Amanda rationed her remaining water and tried to signal passing boats, but traffic in these remote waters was minimal. Her stalker waited patiently, paddling slow circles like a shark around wounded prey. On the second day of captivity, Amanda's stalker approached close enough for communication. A middle-aged man in expensive gear, he seemed completely calm and rational. "You're trespassing in my research area," he called across the water. "I've been studying these whale pods for 10 years. You're disrupting my work." "This is public water," Amanda replied. "You can't strand someone here." "You'll be fine," the man said. "Someone will find you eventually. Consider it a lesson about respecting established researchers." The stalker paddled away, leaving Amanda with the horrifying realization that her imprisonment was motivated by professional jealousy and territorial behavior. Amanda survived 4 more days on rainwater and kelp before a Coast Guard patrol boat spotted her emergency mirror signals. She was dehydrated and hypothermic but alive. Investigation revealed that Dr. Marcus Webb, a disgraced marine biologist who'd lost his university position due to falsified research, had been living in the area illegally and harassing other researchers. Amanda's kayak was found on a remote beach with her equipment carefully organized, as if Webb had been studying her research methods. Webb was arrested but claimed he was protecting his whales from interference. His isolated cabin contained detailed files on dozens of researchers who'd worked in the area, along with photographs taken with telephoto lenses that showed he'd been stalking scientists for years. Tale 4: The Desert Stalker. Photographer Miguel Santos drove to Joshua Tree National Park for a solo camping trip, planning to capture sunrise and sunset images of the iconic desert landscape. He'd been shooting in the desert for years and loved the isolation and dramatic lighting. Miguel set up camp at a dispersed site several miles from the main campgrounds, seeking complete solitude for his artistic work. The remote location offered perfect views and no crowds. On his second night, Miguel noticed headlights in the distance unusual for such a remote area. The light stayed stationary for about an hour, then disappeared, probably another photographer or a lost tourist. The next morning, Miguel found fresh tire tracks circling his campsite. Someone had driven around his tent and equipment during the night, maintaining a distance of about 50 yards, creating a perfect circle in the sand. Miguel felt uneasy, but assumed it was curiosity from another desert visitor. He continued his photography project, hiking to various locations to capture the changing light on rock formations. That evening, the headlights returned, but this time they moved. Someone was driving slowly around the perimeter of his camp, always staying far enough away to avoid direct confrontation but close enough to demonstrate their presence. Miguel tried signaling with his flashlight, but the vehicle's headlights immediately switched off. When he stopped signaling, they resumed their patrol pattern. On day 4, Miguel's situation escalated. He returned from a sunrise shoot to find his water containers empty, not broken or stolen, but carefully drained and replaced exactly where he'd left them. In the desert, water was survival. Miguel had enough for 1 more day, maybe 2 if he rationed strictly. The nearest reliable water source was a 40-mile hike to the visitor center. That night, his stalker's vehicle approached closer, headlights creating dramatic shadows among the Joshua trees. Miguel could hear the engine idling, but couldn't see the driver behind the bright lights. "What do you want?" Miguel shouted into the darkness. No response. The vehicle circled his camp 3 times, then departed. Miguel broke camp and started driving out the next morning, but discovered his nightmare was just beginning. The stalker's vehicle appeared in his rear-view mirror, following at a consistent distance along the rough desert roads. When Miguel stopped, his pursuer stopped. When he resumed driving, the following vehicle matched his speed. Miguel realized he was being herded, forced to take specific routes that led deeper into the desert rather than towards civilization. Miguel's fuel gauge showed half a tank, enough to reach safety if he could drive directly to the main road. But his stalker was controlling his route, forcing him toward remote areas where help would be impossible to find. In desperation, Miguel floored his accelerator and tried to outrun his pursuer, but the other vehicle was better equipped for desert terrain. Miguel's sedan struggled with sand and rocks while his stalker's truck maintained pursuit easily. Miguel's car finally broke down in a wash 20 miles from the nearest paved road. His stalker's truck stopped nearby, engine running, but the driver never emerged. For 6 hours, They waited in a desert standoff, Miguel in his disabled car, his stalker watching from the truck. As the desert heat became unbearable, Miguel realized the strategy forced him to abandon his vehicle and attempt to walk out, ensuring he wouldn't survive the journey. Just before sunset, Miguel heard helicopter rotors. A Park Service search and rescue team had been dispatched when he failed to check out at the visitor center. His stalker's truck immediately drove away, disappearing into the maze of desert washes. Rangers found no trace of the pursuing vehicle, but Miguel's disabled car showed evidence of sabotage sand in the air filter and sugar in the gas tank. Someone had deliberately stranded him in one of the most inhospitable environments in North America. Tale 5: The Forest Game. Bow hunter Tom Mitchell had permission to hunt on private forest land in northern Maine, thousands of acres of pristine wilderness where he could practice traditional archery skills away from crowds. The landowner was an old friend who trusted Tom to respect the property and follow safety protocols. Tom set up a base camp near a small stream, planning to spend a week tracking deer and enjoying the solitude. He'd hunted this property for 5 years and knew every trail, every water source, every likely game area. On his third day, Tom found something disturbing. His tree stand had been moved, not damaged or destroyed, but carefully relocated 50 yards from where he'd installed it. The bolts were properly tightened, the safety harness correctly positioned, but the stand now faced a different direction entirely. Tom assumed the landowner had moved it for some reason, though they hadn't mentioned any planned changes. He repositioned the stand to his preferred location and continued hunting. The next morning, his trail cameras were gone, all 4 devices removed from their mounting straps without damaging the trees. Someone had taken expensive equipment that could only be recovered by someone who knew their exact locations. Tom searched the area thoroughly, but found no trace of his cameras. Worse, he discovered that someone had been in his camp. His sleeping bag was unzipped, his food containers opened and examined, his hunting journal read and left open to a specific page containing his daily schedule. Someone was studying his hunting patterns, learning his routines, and systematically removing his advantages. Tom decided to leave immediately, but his truck wouldn't start. The engine turned over but wouldn't catch, and Tom couldn't diagnose the problem. His cell phone showed no signal in the remote location. Tom was effectively stranded in the forest, dependent on hiking out 15 miles to the nearest road. But as he packed essential supplies for the long walk, he realized someone was watching him. Movement in the forest, always at the edge of his vision, branches breaking in patterns that followed his movement, the sense of being observed by something intelligent and patient. Tom tried hiking toward the main road, but whoever was stalking him began actively interfering with his escape. Fallen trees appeared across trails that had been clear the day before. His trail markers were moved, leading him in circles through areas he thought he knew intimately. Most disturbing, Tom found his own arrows stuck in trees along his route arrows he'd lost during hunting practice over the past several days. Someone had collected them and was using them to mark a trail, like breadcrumbs leading deeper into the forest. Tom realized he was being manipulated, herded through the woods by someone who knew the terrain better than he did. This wasn't random harassment, it was a coordinated effort to control his movement and trap him in an area where rescue would be impossible. On his 4th day of attempted escape, Tom heard voices calling his name. Multiple people, spread throughout the forest, shouting in coordinated patterns that made it impossible to determine their actual locations. "Tom, over here!" The voices came from different directions, sometimes simultaneously, creating confusion about which way to go for help. Tom recognized the tactic hunters working together to drive game toward a specific location. He was being hunted. Tom changed tactics, abandoning all trails and bushwhacking through dense forest toward where he hoped the property boundary would be. Behind him, the voices continued calling, but now they sounded frustrated rather than helpful. After 12 hours of desperate hiking, Tom reached a logging road and flagged down a truck. The driver called authorities, who found Tom's vehicle with its fuel line deliberately cut and his expensive hunting equipment arranged in a neat pile nearby. Investigation revealed that a group of anti-hunting activists had been targeting hunters on private land, using harassment tactics designed to drive them from areas they considered wildlife sanctuaries. Tom's experience was part of a coordinated campaign to make hunting so unpleasant and dangerous that hunters would avoid the region entirely.